80% very common tasks. It's the 20% that are special.
Welcome, everyone. Today we have another exclusive interview with an expert, I would say one of the leading experts on robotics and Tesla Optimus. It's Scott Walter, who is a PhD in mechanical engineering and has co-founded 2 robotics companies on his own. And in this video, I met him back then at a Tesla event in San Luis Obispo in California. And we are discussing the technology and the manufacturing details of Optimus. So this is not a financial video. This is a video of understanding Optimus, the intricacies of robot manufacturing, and how it actually compares and translates into timings, into potential scalability of these robots, how it compares to EVs, because we all know production hell from Model 3 and other problems Tesla ran into. And I want to know from Scott, does that also translate into Optimus manufacturing problems? Or how do we quantify a comparison between a car and a robot? So I hope you follow me on X and YouTube for these daily updates on the future of robotics, on Tesla, how we can capitalize on that. So let's hear what Scott has to say. Let's go.
So going ballistic 5, Scott, we have you here. That's amazing. I have a YouTube channel talking about Tesla shares, but also the future revenue streams, right?
Right.
And Optimus is very important. I think it's a big mistake that, Wall Street's not modeling is in. So I wanted to just hear from you, your perspective on timelines, more commercial timelines. We know Elon wants to deploy a few thousand next year internally and then potentially ship in 2026. Do you think that's realistic?
Yes. So in some ways, I was maybe a little bit optimistic, thinking that it'd be a little bit sooner we can see it, but I knew it was going to happen. And it's a question of whether it's delayed a year or something like that. But we're not talking about a decade away. So the robot that everyone would like to have in their homes, maybe that's a decade away. But the thing is, a practical robot we can see very soon, because all it has to do is work in the factories. So it's not like FSD where there's a lot of challenges that has to work in the real world. These robots only have to work in the factory. So from the standpoint of Tesla, if they have a few thousand next year in the factory, that means they're taking away maybe 1,000 jobs or more, because remember, they can work 2 or 3 shifts. So one bot could potentially be worth like 2.5 to 3. That has a big impact on margins. So suddenly your production costs go down quite a bit. The thing is, Tesla has 145,000 employees. So let's just imagine we replace all those employees with a Tesla bot. We don't have them anymore. Well, then we only need 146,000 Tesla bots, right? That's it. But we're setting up these production lines for a lot more. Maybe we should find outside customers. And so they're looking at realizing first we have to prove it internally, which is going to help the margins. And then in 2026, probably it would be finding the external customers. They should be ready for that. I really think they're very, very close. Most of the challenge is getting the training ready to really get the robots to perform the tasks.
So let me ask you that, because I totally agree. I think this is epic and it's probably bigger than FSD and faster. Let's go into the nitty gritty. If you have a robot and they want to do one specific task, let's say battery assembly or something, how is this technologically looking? Is Tesla delivering Optimus raw and that thing's already ready and there's all a training and fine-tuning problem? Or is it still needing some foundational improvement?
It will probably depend upon the task. So if it already learns to do certain common tasks that you would see in a lot of different factories, it might be ready to go except for that specific task. So for all you know, it's how to pick different kinds of objects or place different kinds of objects. It just has to know the particular task in that factory. And so it would probably be as simple as either a demonstration or maybe a description that we want you to pick apart A, B, and C and bring it over here to these locations in this particular order. And it's like, okay, I understand what you're going. So it's no different than like the car doesn't need to know how to drive your route. It already knows how to drive. It knows how to do all those things. It just doesn't know the route that you want. So you go to the navigation system and say, this is the task you're supposed to do. That's the same thing that's going to happen with Optimus. It already knows how to do the equivalent of braking and steering, turning left and turning right. It has all that down. And so is your task only incorporate those things? That's something else. But now we say, let's get the Optimus, and I want it to do heart surgery. We haven't trained in heart surgery yet, so maybe there would be a lot of training that have to go in there.
I think if you have an Optimus platform that has a base model in there that is pretty good, you have an enormous tail end of cars in the world.
Yes.
Do you think it's likely that we see a SaaS model where you charge, this is $6,000 per year for the base model, but then have an app store where everyone in the world can develop their trained thing, like some Chinese factory does one specific thing, trains them, and then sells that app that gets downloaded in your Optimus if you're able?
Yes. So I'm a strong believer that it's going to be a SaaS model, or what we call a RaaS model, that they won't be sold at first. And Elon basically said that at first they plan on renting them, leasing them, whatever you want, because it makes more sense. It takes some of the risk away from the person who's using it. And also, if you're selling it, you're leaving money on the table. There's so much recurring revenue that would come from that. And it's going to depend upon, like right now, it's like you buy a Model Y, and do you want the performance version or not? No, I'll save some money on that. But later on, I can just pay $2,000 for the upgrade, and it's a lab performance. It's going to be the same thing. It'll be limited in certain tasks, and it may be, well, we don't quite have that trained yet, but eventually we will. And I'm a big believer that, there's going to be this 80-20 kind of rule. The majority of stuff that's going on is 80% very common tasks. It's the 20% that are special. So again, a heart surgeon still knows how to pick and place things. I have to be able to pick up a scalpel. I just don't know how to use a scalpel. So it'll have a foundation model, and then you will need to go in and train specific things. Now, Tesla can train the factory stuff right now because they're in a factory environment, but they're not in a hospital environment. So they would probably get into some sort of agreement with some of these companies to say, we want to train it up, and then we'll do some sort of revenue share. But I agree with you that I think I've been kind of on the record that Tesla bot will affect the bottom line of Tesla before Robotaxi does. Not FSD, but Robotaxi. So before you see a diamond Robotaxi, I think because of margins, and I wasn't sure when they were going to sell it. So Elon saying 2026 we're going to start selling. That was a shock to me. I thought it would be a lot longer before it would go out. They would keep it internal a lot longer.
Well, it's Elon. But I think Elon will be less delayed on his predictions on Optimus than on FSD, on Robotaxi.
Yes.
Very good.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. So Scott agrees also on the thesis that Optimus is going to overtake FSD on the timeline. Very good.
Eventually it will. And I'm not the only one. Cern Basher also has kind of looked at the model. Elon even said that. He said, whatever ARK Invest is saying that the Robotaxi model is worth in Tesla, that the Tesla bot will be worth, he didn't say order of magnitude. He say more than that, or a couple multiples of that, and maybe implying maybe 3 or 4. But CERN's model is like, it's more like 10 times.
My last question, then I'll let you go because that's very interesting. The manufacturing lines and the factory build out for the Optimus, how does this compare to cars? So how long does it take to get to 1 million run rate factory? What do you think is the CapEx roughly, and how long does it take to build this thing? Okay,
so the biggest challenge are the actuators. So once they get the design locked on the actuators, that is where they need to do the manufacturing. The batteries, they already know how to produce. The FSD chips, they already know how to produce. Some of the other body parts are just simple castings. They're just injection molding. The cameras they can buy for it. So when you look at the bill of materials, it's like, there's nothing special there.
What does an actuator do? Just explain.
An actuator is basically the motors that make your arm do this and that and everything.
So all the little in every...
Yes. So you need 3 just to get the shoulder to move in the directions you want. You've got also the elbow, you need to have 1. And so you have 42 of them in the Optimus.
They're all identical, but different sizes?
No, they're different sizes. So they have a family around. They have a family of about 7 different kinds of motors. So an actuator is basically a fancy word for a motor. It basically means a motor with kind of encoders in there and a transmission system and everything else. And that's what's going to make the thing move. Each of those, let's say they're $1,000 a piece, which is probably the high end of what they should be able to produce them for $1,000. 42 of them, that's $42,000. And then you throw everything else in, you're clean 50. But if you can drive the cost of those things down, and there's basically 6 big actuators, what they call for the structural ones, plus for the hands. So 7 motor types.
So 1,000 is what you pay right now in the market for an actuator?
Probably, well, you can't because they're custom. Okay. So to find the ones you want, it's going to be around there. Some will say they're a little bit more than that. Once you get the volume, you can easily get to 1,000 or below. But if suddenly you get it down to 100 a piece, you go from $42,000 to $4,200. When you do that, and Elon has even said that, and I've figured out from my own bill of materials that you should be able to produce the Optimus bot for around $10,000. If you can produce it for $100 per actuator, it's really hard to get up to $10,000. because you're looking at $4,200 and I need to come up with another $5,000 somewhere. The batteries alone are just a couple $100.
Is it like an electric motor type design of an activity?
It's a type of motor with a special transmission in there, but in some ways it's a challenge. In some ways it's not challenging because it's very different than the actuators you have in an industrial robot.
And are the actuators all the 7 types the same design or different size?
They're designed, so of the 7 types, they're all the exact same size. So for instance, in the shoulder, there's 3 actuators here. They're all identical, but they're designed like Legos that you can pop them together in any order that you want. That's part of the design.
And you have some in here too?
And then you have like these 2 here for the wrist, which are identical. And then you have, right now, 6 of them in the hand. They're probably going to have a couple of more because they're getting the 22 degree of freedom hand that could do this.
And they are, of course, much smaller.
Yes, they're much smaller. They're definitely much smaller.
And so you say you have 7 different types or 3 different types, like size-wise?
For the hands, it's 1 type.
One type.
1 type, 1 size. And then you have the actuator here, which is a linear drive. And then you have one for the elbow, that linear drive. Then you have one down here. For the leg right in here, also linear drive. So you have 3 linear drives, which are 3 different sizes. And then you have 3 rotary drives, which are 3 different sizes. So that's 6 total. So all you have to do is come up with 6 lines to produce the actuators you need for the bot.
Okay.
And that's the most expensive part. So, and that doesn't take much of a footprint. You don't need gigacasting anywhere.
But it's like vastly easier than a car, obviously.
Vastly easy. There is nothing tricky about it going together.
And you also don't need gigafactory scale things, right?
You don't. You can find a small industrial park anywhere and start producing it. Now, we know they're going to produce them in Giga Texas, but eventually they could just set up manufacturing sites anywhere in the country and just start putting them together. It's not going to be that hard once you ramp it up to be able to produce.
So in capacity, you think it's basically no problem for Tesla?
No problem. All you need is warehousing logistics anywhere in the country, because most everything in the Tesla bot you could almost produce in your basement. I mean, someone who has, and basically they're doing that right now. A lot of the actuators they were building in-house just with some very basic equipment, some CNC machines, buying some equipment here and there, popping in some different components, some soldering irons, so you get a few things. Eventually you automate that whole thing to bring the cost down. The only thing that you can't really produce it in your basement or in your garage, if you're going to look at it, is the FSD chip. But you can buy it.
But that's easy.
Yes, they already have their supply chain for that.
So do you have a number for the CapEx for 1 million Optimus a year capacity? What do you think, how much CapEx you need?
I'm not sure what the CapEx. So I don't have like a number in my head, but it's going to be a lot less than coming up with like a gigafactory.
So a couple of 100 million or something a bit.
Probably. I would say billion would be like the cap of the CapEx. I don't think more than that.
Very good. It's very exciting.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's going to be an interesting future.
So that's it for the video with Scott. I hope you enjoyed it. I took away a lot of interesting things here. The main takeaway for me is that Optimus is much, much easier and less complex for the hardware to be manufactured than EVs, Model 3s, Model Ys. And that is very important for our projections and predictions for Tesla stock. Because if I am right, and Optimus is the most transformative platform that ever hit human markets and economies, then it's very important to understand if demand is basically uncapped and unlimited once the technology works, which I think happens very soon. If the market is uncapped once the technology works, it becomes a supply problem. And we know that Tesla ran into supply constraints when it was ramping up Model 3. My takeaway here is, after talking to Scott and many others, that it is actually much easier to produce Optimus robots by a factor of 100, 10 to 100. And that means we can scale, in my opinion, to 1 million manufacturing capacity per year for Optimus within 18 months after feasibility, which I think might happen 2025, and probably 10 million within 36 months. So if that's true, we will see a value creation trajectory that exceeds what everyone thinks right now. So this is huge, it is imminent, and I think the robot revolution is upon us. That's why you should follow me on X and YouTube, because we are bringing you here daily updates on what is happening in the robot revolution, how you can prepare for it, how you can capitalize on it, be on the right side of history, and how you can get the timing right. that's why it's very important to stay on top of it. So hope to see you very soon. Hope you enjoyed it. And until then.